Hi, it's Jerry Roberts back with another edition of Newsmakers, the Plague Year. It is Friday, August 14th, and we are delighted to have from Sacramento, Assembly Member, or should I call you Senator? Not yet, Monique Limon, who's going to be speaking with us what's going on up there and specifically about the problems we're going to be facing with evictions and foreclosures within days. Assembly member, thanks so much for joining us. You're in Sacramento. What's the senior in the last couple weeks of the session now?
Well, Jerry, we have 17 more days until the end of the legislative session. And this is a regular session, and certainly anything can happen after that. And there could be a call from the governor for a special session, but we have a number of issues that the legislature is trying to get through. One of them has to do with the tenants, eviction protections, mortgage forbearance, but we also have a lot of other pressing issues related to the health pandemic itself, related to environmental issues, overall housing creation issues, homeless issues. You have a big vaping bill related to the vaping and flavored tobacco space. So there's a number of big bills that are coming down the pipeline. And, I would be remiss if I didn't also mention that there's a series of criminal justice reform bills, too, that came out of our Black Lives Matter movement.
Okay. All right. Well, let's start with the renter and eviction stuff, because there's like 4 or 5 million people in California that are on the brink, and probably tens, if not hundreds of thousands locally within your district. So two things have happened. One, the $600 a week federal additional unemployment benefit expired at the end of July. That was put in right at the beginning of the pandemic when the economy first tanked. And now there's been a moratorium in the courts in California amid a lot of state and local moratoriums on evictions that's going to expire on August 31st or September 1st, the same day you end. So we're facing what's called an eviction cliff, that a lot of people will face eviction because they can't afford to pay the rent in the next month. So what's the problem as you see it, and what's happening in the legislature that's attempting to address it?
Well, there are two main legislative vehicles that are trying to tackle the eviction perspective and the eviction issue that we have, not just for renters, but also for homeowners. We have to remember that we have tenants, but we also have homeowners who are struggling to pay their mortgage. And thus far, we have gone through the pandemic with the Judicial Council having made a rule for our state in terms of when tenants could be evicted. We also have a number of financial institutions that have voluntarily given forbearance, for example, for homeowners or owner-occupied homes. And that's all coming to an end. It's all expiring. This pandemic has gone on way longer than any of us wanted or expected. And certainly now we are left with trying to find the fix. What would be the fix in the state of California? And I can tell you that we've been involved in very active conversations. Assembly Bill 1436 is one that I'm co-authoring. I've gotten very involved in that particular bill because there was a different bill that would allow for forbearance for homeowners and small landlords that would have given them the opportunity no one's talking about giving anything away for free. We're talking about giving people more time to pay their debt.
What would AB 1436 do?
So AB 1436 would allow for a pathway for tenants to get more time to pay their rent. But it does have a specific language on how that rent would come. One of the things, when and how that rent would come. One of the things that we've worried a lot about is what we call the lump sum payments at the very end. If you say you can't pay your rent in 6 months, for 6 months, and you have evidence that you've been impacted by COVID, on month 7, will you have all that 6-month rent? And that's the same pathway or conversation we're having around mortgages. We believe that It's important to give people more time to pay off their loans. And I want to remind folks that this is, this is a crisis, this is an emergency, and certainly we did not, necessarily think that we were going to be dealing with these particular issues this year. And we are having to make hard choices and having very difficult conversations. With 17 days left for the legislature to end their regular session, we are certainly in negotiations, in conversations with lots of groups around these issues, lots of groups who represent just diverse voices that care about tenant protections, that care about mortgages, forbearance, and very other things. So neither of these bills, Assembly Bill 1436 or Senate Bill 1410, are final conversations. I actually, and Jerry, you know this, you've been in Sacramento. This is when probably we'll see the most changes in language and negotiations because we are on a time crunch and we've been having these conversations since March.
Yeah, the late Assembly Speaker Leo McCarthy, who I covered, used to call this part of the year nut cutting time, as he really get down to what's going on. So you've got, basically you're trying to referee a number of different economic interests here. You've got renters who can't afford to pay their rent. You've got homeowners or mortgage holders who can't afford to pay the bank if they don't get paid. And then you've got the banks. So are all the players on board with this, or where do things stand?
All of the players are engaged. I would say that not all the players are on board. You have some groups that think we need to be doing more for tenant and owner occupied homeowners that may be losing. You have financial institutions who have real concerns about what will happen if a large group of people stop paying their mortgage. And so I think that finding a solution for a state of 40 million people with millions of people at stake in different regions of California, different financial situations, is not going to be easy. And certainly these bills, as they move forward, will have trade-offs. They won't be perfect. They will have trade-offs, but we as legislature have to act by September 1st. We have a mandate from Judicial Council, and we are also very, very clear that since the federal $600 payment stopped on July 26th, combining with millions of people being potentially evicted in the month of September without a solution, that the alternative to do nothing and sit back and just watch what happens with the market is significantly worse for the state of California, both on the economic side and on the health side. This is not a time where we can afford to see more people end up on the streets or homeless. This is going to have a huge impact on us. So we are left with very difficult decisions to make, and I believe that we will get somewhere. And I can tell you that the governor's office is very engaged.
Because he seemed like he's been kind of checked. I mean, he's got a few other things on his plate, obviously, but so do you think that there's going to be sort of a grand solution here between the Assembly, Senate, and the governor, and everybody's going to get together and figure it out?
It won't be kumbaya, but there will be a solution. Yes, I believe there will. And I think there will be trade-offs. I think that no one's going to get anything that they want completely. But I think that what we agree on by August 31st will be basically the best thing that, the best product given the circumstances, given a crisis, given an emergency, and given the fact that there is not a way to make everyone happy and everyone complete and whole as we would like. I do believe that the financial and tenant ecosystem requires that we do something not just for tenants, but also for homeowners who are on the verge of losing their home because they'll stop paying or making mortgage payments.
Well,
so
and also, as I understand your bill, the AB, you and Assembly Member Chu, AB 1436 also would have some coverage for small landlords. Is that own what, up to 4 units?
4 units or less. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is also for landlords. And again, this is part of our larger conversation related to the ecosystem of housing and how important housing is. So I know that there's landlords with more units who want to be included in the conversation, but this is where the conversation is at today. It's a morning right now, and I've already had multiple conversations about this this morning. And so I expect that those will last throughout the weekend, certainly all next week as we head into August 31st.
All right. Okay. When you were on the show last time, it was really early in the pandemic, really early in the emergency orders. And we talked a lot about unemployment and how people could apply for benefits. And there continues to be, as I understand it, a lot of blockage in the system. There's something like 1 million unemployment claims that are backed up. Can you update us on that and where that stands and what people who are having trouble still getting their benefits should be doing?
Absolutely. And regrettably, this has been an area that has been just really hard for California to grapple with. The increase, it's the exponential increase in cases for unemployment has been particularly difficult. And we continue to see constituents call and email our office asking for assistance. And I remind folks that our office, as well as Senator Jackson's office, are really here to be an added voice in the process of calling or emailing. We don't have the authority to tell the EDD department who they should process or who they shouldn't, what they can approve or not approve, but we are an added voice. It's been very important. We have not stopped since March working with constituents, trying to ensure that we are, again, calling, emailing on their behalf, trying to get answers because we know how dire the situation is. So regrettably, it's an issue that still continues. We've seen small improvements, including, longer hours, more staff associated with it. But it still continues to be an issue in California.
All right. And we should note that you are the chair of the banking committee in the Assembly. And the banks obviously have a huge role to play in all of this. I guess the worst, or one of the worst case scenarios that I see is people can't pay their rent. Landlords can't pay their mortgage. So what is the bank takes a distressed property and sells it to some huge, hedge fund or institutional thing, and there's people on the street. What's been the sort of attitude of the banking lobby toward all of this? Are they being cooperative, or are they sort of more, hewing to the stereotypical, it's all about the Benjamin's view of the banks?
Well, the financial institutions have a vested interest in this because they have the option to, also foreclose. And foreclose means that they don't get any of the money. Certainly they'll sell it off eventually. But we do feel that they've been very engaged, but certainly, their perspective is very different than our perspective as legislators. But they've been engaged in the conversations. They have willingly offered some level of forbearance. And now the question is, will they all do it? One of my experiences as chair of banking and finance is that there's such a huge umbrella of financial institutions, not all are the same. And not all have the same practices or guidelines when it comes to helping constituents. Some are, for example, regulated and licensed under the state of California, some are not. And there really is a difference. So what we want to do, and this is, I think, where it gets into harder conversations, what we'd like to do in the state of California is find a way to create a standard for all of Californians, so Californians know what to expect from their financial institutions who offer a mortgage, who offer a loan under these situations and circumstances. For example, when the PPP program came out, even though it was federal, our phones were inundated with calls from throughout the state of California about people expressing how differently they were treated, right? Small businesses, how differently they were treated, the different experiences they had amongst financial institutions in California. And we recognized at that moment that we really needed to have some very basic guidelines and standards of what Californians could expect from their financial institutions as it relates to either, again, loans within our capacity as in the state of California or mortgages.
Well, you had this bigger bill, I think AB 2501, that would have covered car loans, repossession, payday loans, I think was in there, a couple of other things. And I guess that really got hammered by the lobbyists. What happened with that?
Absolutely. I think that one of the things that you see is that 2501 was a very bold bill, and we understood that we needed to introduce a bold bill that would be a conversation. Our experience is that through the process, bills get amended and changed a whole lot, but this was one of those instances that if you didn't have a bill, you didn't have a needed conversation. And that bill, Assembly Bill 2501, came one vote short. For many people in the legislature, they said, we've never seen this happen, where it's one vote short and we were not able to get the vote needed to continue a conversation. That bill had, just so people understand, had lobbyists opposing at about a 34-to-1 ratio, 34 opposed. And these were mostly financial institutions who did not believe that the conversation should move forward in that particular format. And this is what we deal with. This is part of our work. I also think that, as is part of our work as legislators, even when you have a bill that doesn't move forward, you are able to find ways to continue through other vehicles. So Assembly Bill 1436 has some of those protections in place in the bill.
Some of that substance got folded into 1436?
It did. The mortgage forbearance piece got folded into 1436. There's not a conversation right now about what to do with auto loans or small dollar loans. Those conversations at the moment have ended in light of the COVID pandemic, but we are still continuing to talk about mortgage forbearance.
Well, it's interesting, the Democrats have such large majorities, but obviously if it didn't get out of committee, there were Democrats who voted against it. So, I mean, what was what killed it for them?
Right. So I would say that it got out. So just to be clear, it did get out of committee. It didn't get off the floor vote.
Oh, okay.
So it did get out of committee. It didn't get off the floor vote. And fascinating, I don't think that there were many Democrats who voted against it. They just didn't vote for it. And so they stayed off the bill. And I think that there was just wide lobbying. I mean, at the end, one legislator or a few legislators, competing against an industry that can afford an unlimited amount of lobbyists is particularly difficult. I also think that we are in a unique moment where people are really trying to identify what's the best answer, what's the best solution to some of this. I think that while we often talk in California that we're so blue, there's so many Democrats, I think we have to recognize that the Democratic tent in the state of California is huge, very huge. And we all bring different perspectives from different areas. And in my 4 years in the state legislature, the assumption that all Democrats would agree on everything is not really there. I don't really see it for very many bills, to be honest with you. There's a select, a number of bills where you see Democrats all up on it, but I think in some of this more meaty, substantial stuff, you don't see it. And I certainly expect that the tenant and loan conversations will be like that. You probably won't see all Democrats supporting these.
All right, let me ask you just to close on this. So what's the call to action? What should people do, who are worried about eviction, who are worried about this problem, whether it's affecting them directly or not? I mean, what should people be doing? Just sit and wait, or is there anything to be done?
Well, I think it's important to chime in. I think certainly, I know, this bill is up in front of Senator Jackson's committee next week. Assembly Bill 1436. So it will, and I think generally she's been supportive of trying to find a solution for this very big issue. I know she cares about this. So I think reaching out to both of our office to try to, give us perspective. I know I've certainly heard from both tenant groups and small landlords who are like, look, we want to make it. We want to help, and we've been flexible, but we also have these ideas, and this is how it would, limit our ability to help. This is how it would help. Or further advance our ability to help. I think that those are really important, but it is scheduled this particular bill to be heard on August 18th in the Senate Judiciary Committee. which Senator Hannah Beth Jackson chairs.
Okay. All right. We just got a couple minutes, and you have to forgive me. I got to get some political gossip going here. So we saw Senator Kamala Harris on the ticket now with Joe Biden running for vice president. And she's getting slimed, as one might expect. But all the kind of inside baseball stuff is that everybody in Sacramento is now lining up to ask Gavin Newsom, the governor, to appoint them to Kamala's seat, assuming she's going to win. Have you applied for that already, or what? Who's the favorite?
So absolutely have not applied for that. But you are right that the second that the announcement was made, the conversation started happening about who could potentially be a candidate. And I think that there's been several names thrown out. I know that, you look at our executive branch and you have names like, Javier Becerra, Alex Padilla, you have, Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez, Senator Marilena Durazo, you have, many names.
How about Betty Yee? What about Betty Yee? Why not Betty Yee?
I think Betty Yee is probably in the running as well. I want us to focus on legislation that we have to get done by the 31st.
Okay.
Then we can focus on November 3rd, because I will tell you that I think this is premature. We have to win November 3rd, and we haven't won yet, and we know what happened 4 years ago. So, my hope is that we could put all that energy into what's in front of us at this particular moment. But, when you're in this particular world, people can't help themselves. The second an announcement is made, here we go, right? We're having conversations about this, but this will be an appointment. I think, just to clarify, the governor will be appointing for this particular position. And I think some pundits even have said, well, what if the governor appoints himself? I don't see that. But again, I'm also of the mind, like, we have to win November 3rd first.
And just to close on that, I think today's conventional wisdom is that he would appoint a statewide constitutional officer, so he gets a double dip, because then he would get to appoint that person as well. What about Karen Bass? She was kind of the flavor of the week for a while in the vice president. Is she in the running, you think?
I absolutely think she's in the running. Yes, I think she's in the running. I think there are going to be a number of individuals in the state of California who are in the running, and I think the pool won't be limited. I think the pool will be plentiful of individuals who could serve in that capacity, and I think that if that happens, our governor will have a difficult decision to make.
All right, and then real quickly, you got a couple of new constituents this week. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are now in the district. Have you met with them or had any contact there yet?
No contact, haven't met with them. And you're not alone in asking me this question. I've been asked this question in Sacramento as the news
I ask the questions that ordinary people want to know.
Right, in international. And I would say that from my perspective, I have more contact with non-famous people than I do with kind of the big celebrities in our district. I certainly think that I just don't hear from them as much. There's several celebrities that live in the district who I've never met, and I've never heard from. I've not seen an email or call come in on an issue. So I expect that that's likely going to happen. But yeah.
Yeah, Salute is in there pitching. Listen. Speaking of Salute, so just to close on a more serious matter, so I mean, what's the forecast about what's going to happen in Congress? I mean, they've all gone home now.
Right, and that worries us, because that means that we won't have a federal deal until September. And the executive order that the president signed, as we've all seen and heard from both Republicans and Democrats, is questionable on its legal standing, on whether he had that ability to do that. So,
well, on this issue, on the eviction issue, it doesn't do anything anyway. I mean, it's right. I'd recommend somebody ought to think about this somewhere.
Right, and this is something where as a state assembly member, I'm in regular contact with our Congress member on a weekly basis about these issues, and we are asking him, when are we going to get it? When are we going to get it? We know that a proposal's already been on the table. The HEROES Act is one of the proposals that's been on the table, but this is real. I mean, every day that goes by is a day where you have Californians that don't know on whether they can rely on future assistance. And I want to be super clear that this is about helping people who are having a difficult time and can prove that they're having a difficult time hiring. I don't think this is about freebies, about anything related to that. I mean, in our office, we hear from so many constituents, and we know the personal stories of people who want to go back to work, but whose job is closed and who can't open. People who want to go back to working full time, but are only being given a small number of hours. Many people right now are really struggling with what to do, how to manage the education piece for their kids, having to make decisions between going back to work or asking for a leave, permanent or temporary, to try to help their kids with schooling and education. So the stories for me are very real, of people who want to go back, who want us to reopen, who want life to be healthier and better, but who have these economic challenges. And that's who we are talking about this money potentially helping. And I think the narrative sometimes gets changed, that this is just about, freebies or helping people who don't need it. I have hundreds and hundreds of stories. I have hundreds of people who have reached out to our office who I can tell you need this money. And every single day that goes by that the federal government doesn't tell us what the future holds for these individuals financially is another day that we get closer to seeing people lose their home, people lose their ability to cover, healthcare insurance, and creating a greater issue for our state from the health side, from the pandemic side, but also the economic side.
Yeah. Just to close on the pandemic, the governor's had a couple of very shaky weeks here, including the sort of mysterious departure of the public health director. But, he had this dimmer switch theory of the pandemic, that we could, go back a little bit and then cut back and everything. But boy, what a mess it's turned into. Do you think maybe we should just shut it down for a couple of months, get the thing, to a low level, or continue with this neither here nor there kind of approach that we're taking?
Well, I think you're right in that the approach for the state of California was an approach that was very thoughtful, an approach that we attempted would give us the outcome we wanted, which is less cases. And that has not happened. And we did see the least amount of cases when we did the early shutdown, the actual shutdown. I think that like everybody else, I want to see a healthy economy. I want to see a healthy community, and do not believe that we are in a place to reopen. I think the data, the information that we are seeing is not leading there. So if we did a temporary shutdown based on the evidence of, not just accurate data, which we need, but also from our health professionals, I would be supportive. I do think that we have to continue to be careful. We have to continue to, change behaviors. And I think that that's been one of the most difficult things. That doesn't mean that we agree or we want the economy to shut down. It also doesn't mean that we don't recognize that our small businesses, large businesses, that our economy is hurting. But this is part of, I think, legislative decision making, where we have to make really hard decisions. Do you sacrifice something in the short run for better gains in the long run? Or do you say, we're not going to sacrifice anything in the short run and prolong the impact that this has on our community? And that's been, I think, a lot of the debate. No one that I know wants this. Like, no one that I know does. I mean, we all want our community to open back up. We all want to be healthy.
Right. But that's the fundamental question underlying all this, isn't it? I mean, it's like, we're having all these economic problems. They're caused by the shutdown. They're not caused by the shutdown. They're caused by the pandemic. The pandemic is the problem. And that seems to me to be the a priority that we need to address. But you're the one in office. So
and I agree. I think it's the pandemic that we have to address. The pandemic is what started, right? The potential shutdown. It wasn't the shutdown. Like this, the shutdown didn't come before a pandemic. The shutdown only came as a result and a consequence of the pandemic. And so I think we still are there. We're looking at what will happen in the fall, especially as we see the start of flu season. And I think that this will be a very slow process with the hope that we can move faster if the evidence and data and the health conditions allow us to.
All right. Assemblymember Monique Limon, thank you so much. You're up there. You're one of the more substantive elected officials that I know, and you really like to dig into this stuff. And we'll be watching on the eviction and foreclosure front and also some other stuff. Thanks so much for taking some time. You got an interesting couple of weeks coming up. Stay in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.